G'day and welcome to Conversations on Faith FM with Robbie, Alicia and Brad. This is your place to explore faith, life and everything in between. Text in your thoughts on today's conversation on 04888 185 00. Now get ready to join the conversation right across Australia, right here on Faith FM.
Good afternoon, Australia. Good afternoon, good evening. Because we have different time zones, yeah?
We do.
But
heaps of different times.
It's mainly good afternoon, Australia. We are your conversations team. I'm here with Robbie and Brad, and let's get us going for this afternoon. How's everyone this afternoon?
It could even be an evening because we just recently, Faith FM, even though we call it Faith FM Australia, actually just opened a station in New Zealand.
That is the best news that I've heard today. We have a station in New Zealand. So good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Hello to Wendy on Facebook. Nice of you to join us. I see your name pop up every week, so it's awesome to have you join us in our conversation today.
And look who we have back this week.
Dun, dun, dun,
Hey,
dun.
am I coming in this time? Like, is my
You
voice
are.
working? Is
Yeah.
everything? Okay,
I'm very
cool.
happy, Robbie. You're working.
I'm always nervous to talk because it's like half the time no one hears me and then you hear me. Anyway, we've got it nailed, it looks like, today.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Let's not get too ahead of ourselves.
I'm so proud of you guys. You guys did a show without me and you did really, really well. I listened
Thanks,
to a little
mate.
bit of it, but I was on the road driving and it was way too hard to join you guys at that particular time. So, but you guys did excellent.
Thanks,
Now
mate.
I feel bad for looking at the news this morning.
You don't have to feel bad. No, you just don't look at the news. Then you don't feel bad. There you go.
Yeah. Hey, have you seen what's happening in the news today?
No.
Not at
because
all. Because I don't watch the news.
that was the whole point of the
I
show,
listened to
right?
our show last
I
week.
almost got you to fall for it. No, you guys are doing good. Listen, I did check the news this morning and I'm upset. That's how it happens,
Okay.
right? You read the news and you feel upset. That's why you said not to watch it last week. But for many people in Australia, interest rates just went up again yesterday. So this is getting ridiculous. I'm feeling it, and I'm sure many other people around Australia are feeling that their home loans are getting more and more expensive to maintain. But the other crazy thing that I saw in the news this morning, which you guys wouldn't have seen because you don't read the news anymore,
That's right.
was this past 2 days ago in Boston, in the United States, they had the largest ever gathering of Satan worshippers for a
I did
convention.
hear
Wow.
about that.
Yeah, a convention called Satan Con. So it's like
Satan
Comic Con.
Con.
It's called Satan Con 2023. It was the largest gathering of Satan worshippers in American history in one place.
Yeah, right.
And there's some crazy stuff going around social media at the moment. There's videos of people in there having the opening ceremony and they're just shredding pages out of the Bible. There's the chanting chants to Satan, down with God, all this stuff. It's crazy.
Oh,
and
wow.
so, it's just right there in your face. Absolutely incredible. So anyway, that's all we're talking about today. That's just what I saw in the news this morning.
That's interesting. Like, in a sense, it's ironic because, the Bible itself, the physical book, as Christians, we don't believe there's anything special about the physical book. It's the words of God, but it's not God.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's perhaps the difference between Christianity and, say, Islam, for example, because for them, the Quran is something that is like incredibly spiritual and special. And so that's why to desecrate the Quran is a grave offense. But to us as Christians, none of that really matters. And ultimately, it doesn't matter if people glorify Satan or worship him or rip up Bibles because Jesus has already won.
Well, the funny thing is, with a lot of these guys I saw interviewed, they actually don't believe in a literal devil, which I found kind of ironic, considering they call themselves Satanists. They, many of them, some of them do, but most of them, they say, believe in the. It's a persona. It's a literary description of all things anti-God. And so what they're really saying is that we're anti-religion, we're anti-God, but they dress up like in black Gothic stuff and like the blood and the horns and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, a very very strange world that we're living in. But anyway, on a positive note, how are you guys doing today?
Good. You know, just going back to what you were saying, that sort of like makes me angry, and so I'm glad I didn't watch it, because when I watch things like that, and we'll get into that social media and stuff in a bit, it just makes me so angry, and I can't do anything about it. So I'm going to try my best to stay away from that news that you just shared, because I'm not strong enough to not be angry. But yeah, we're doing good over here in the best state in Australia.
Yeah. I think
it's definitely
things are breaking up on the line. I can't quite hear you. What are you saying, Victoria? What?
Yeah. It's definitely been all 4 seasons here today. I had to do some very fast work on my hair to not have a complete afro before I came into the studio after being outside for a few minutes. Very, very windy. But no, it's windy. It's been nice. Yep. You know, classic Melbourne. It was windy, and then it was sunny, and then it rained, and now it's windy again.
Yeah.
Well, I'm back up in Queensland at the moment, and it was cold this morning. It was 19 degrees, man.
Wow.
I had to get a jacket on. That's how cold I was.
You know what the top is here today, Robbie?
Now I got my t-shirt on. The sun's out. Perfect.
Lovely. Well, don't worry. Your minimum was probably higher than our maximum down here today.
Well, anyway, you're listening to Conversations on Faith FM right across Australia, and this is the show where we do just that. We have conversations about life and faith and everything in between. If you've missed any previous episodes, you can catch up on the missed details of these great conversations we have here on Faith FM. You can check out faithfm.com.au. You can go to the podcasting section, look for the Conversation Show, or you can go to all these amazing podcasting platforms, which if you just Google, you'll find them because we're on them. And you can catch up with any of the missed things. Now, we have a giveaway on this episode. Alicia, do you happen to know what the giveaway is? It is going to be this one. You need this one because of what's happening in the world, all the messed up stuff. You need this book. What's this book we're giving away today?
The book that we are giving away is called... Brad will help us with that.
Sure. It's called Finding Peace in a World of Worry.
I actually didn't know what the name of the book was. I knew it had the word peace in it, but...
there you go. And you were worried about it.
So I was worried about it,
so you can have peace about not knowing the name of the book?
Exactly.
There you go. It all works out.
This is a great book, Finding Peace in a World of Worry. Now, you're going to save the phone number. It's 0488 18500. If you're on social media, you can catch this live streamed on Facebook and on YouTube. Just search for Conversations on Faith FM and it will come up somewhere along the line. And join the conversation. Text in on our number, 0488 18500, or you can leave messages in the social media feed and we'll see them in real time.
I have a question for you guys. I was having a conversation with my wife about this last week because she was listening to the show and she said, the number's so hard to remember. And for her, the way that we phrase the number, so as 0488 18500, she found it really hard. And so I said to her, what would be an easier way for you to remember it? And she looked at it and she goes, it would be 0488 818 500.
Okay, well, I'm glad your wife now knows the number.
Well, it's just one of those funny things, we think in different ways and remember numbers in different ways. And
to me, I don't ever care about 04 because every mobile number in Australia is 04. So what's the actual number? It's 888, and then what? 185, and then what? 00. Anyway, whatever you got to do, you can Google it. You can go to the Faith FM page. We have the show numbers listed there in case you're missing them at any time. The Breakfast Show, Drive Time, Tassie Encounters, all the good shows, Aussie Pastor. We've got the show numbers on our Facebook Faith FM webpage, so you can check it out there. But anyway, beside all that, join the conversation today. We should probably explain what our conversation is going to be, guys.
Yes, that's a good idea. What's our conversation today?
Brad.
Oh, me. We're going to be having a little bit of a chat about social media and mental health. And I think this will probably touch a little bit on some of the stuff we talked about last week to do with the news, in how social media kind of fits in with news and that sort of thing as well. And we touched on some ideas talking about, well, you know, consuming news and through social media can be something that's quite negative for your mental health. So we want to broach that topic and say, as Christians, how do we engage with social media? Should we even engage with social media? Is it good for your mental health? Is it bad for your mental health? And so what does that practically mean for what we do on the day-to-day?
And we have a very special guest on today's episode. She'll be joining us in just a little bit. Her name is Jennifer Sukes. I hope I'm saying that right. We'll find out very shortly. And she is a professional health psychologist, and she has a real interest and passion and worked many, many years in this field of mental health and resilience and all those sorts of things. Conversations we've had on this show before, if you've been listening. And so she's going to join us in just a little bit, and we're going to be talking to her about social media and the impact it's having on mental health and what we can do to, you know, exercise and have positive mental health habits and things like that to, just survive in this really interesting world that we've all sort of not evolved into, but we've all sort of stumbled into, I guess. So, pretty exciting show. So we've got a few minutes before she's going to join us. When you guys think of this title that we sort of came up with, social media and mental health, what sort of things come to mind for you guys individually?
That's a very good question, Robbie, and one that I'm going to spend a bit of time thinking about, because it is actually time for us to go to a song. So maybe, like, if you're listening, think about this question as well. What comes to mind when you think of social media? Is it a good feeling, a bad feeling? We'd love to know. Let us know on 04 888 185 00, and we'll see you after the song.
Hear the voice of love that's calling. There's a chair that waits for you, and a friend who understands everything you're going through. But you keep standing at a distance, in the shadow of your shame. There's a light of hope that's shining. Won't you come and take your place and bring it all to the table? There's nothing he ain't seen before. All your sin, all your sorrow and your sadness, there's a Savior and he calls. Bring it all to the table. He can see the weight you carry, the fear that haunts your heart. Through the cross you've been forgiven, you're accepted as you are. And bring it all to the table. There's nothing he ain't seen before. All your trials, all your worries and your burdens, there's a Savior and he calls. Bring it all to the table. You can bring it all. there's no one who's turned away. All you sinners, all you saints, come right in and find your grace. Come on in, take your place. There's no one who's turned away. All you sinners, all you saints, come right in and find your grace and bring it all to the table. There's nothing he ain't seen before. All your sin, all your sorrow and your sadness, there's a Savior and he calls, bring it all to the table. And he calls, bring it all to the table.
You're listening to Conversations on Faith FM.
So that was Lauren Day with her song To the Table. And just before we went to the break, we were talking about social media and sort of what we think about when we hear the word social media or when we think of social media. Brad, what comes to your mind when you think of social media?
It's funny because I remember when social media first was kind of becoming a thing, right? And this is not going right back to, the days
MySpace.
of internet relay chat, Robbie, that sort of thing.
MySpace. That was the first one.
MySpace
MySpace.
is the first one. But it was interesting because I felt like when social media first started out, it was really a personal engagement platform where you would share stuff about yourself and other people could engage with that and you could discover things about other people. And, there wasn't a like mechanism or anything like that. The primary way that you would engage with other people is you'd have to comment. You'd actually have to really engage in a thoughtful way, I guess. Whereas today, I feel like a lot of that sort of thoughtful engagement has disappeared. People just have reactions to things, whether, it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, et cetera, TikTok. There's not actually as much social engagement to social media anymore. It's really shallow stuff now.
It's really just become the media element, and the social element is really a misrepresentation now, I think. As you say, it's kind of, it's just a platform to basically vent, and we
so much of
react to it.
Yeah, so much of it is just corporatized as well, though.
Yeah, for sure.
I know for me, looking through social media feeds, there's very little actual content from the people I care about, right? From friends and family. So much of it is just ads for corporate products or companies or whatever it might be. And a lot of that doesn't really interest me as much. And yet, we just keep scrolling.
That's funny because, for me, when I think of social media, I'm quite addicted to, ASMR packaging sort of videos, and they're 20 seconds long. I could scroll for hours, and that's just
what is
me,
it about that? Because I've never seen the fascination with it. Is it just you just like the sounds?
Yeah, I think it's the sound and the way
texture.
that people pack things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I find interesting for some weird reason. And another one is restocking. So then it just makes me want to go and buy all of these fancy containers to put our food in, and then my partner's like, it's such a waste of time, you're not going to keep up with it, we don't have the money to buy all these matching containers for our pantry and our fridge. So social media for me, I'm so bad, and it's something that I know and I realize, and I'm trying to work on it.
What about you?
So
you're a bit older than Alicia and I. So what was your first? No, I don't say that in a rude way. What was your first engagement? No, it's funny how when you say to someone, "Oh yeah, you're a bit older than me," and we immediately assume it's an insult. It's like, no, I'm curious as to your wisdom.
Yeah. Look. I first got on the internet when you had to buy a CD from Telstra. It used to be Telstra Big Pond. And it was Telstra on Australia. That was what the name of the internet was, on Australia. Yeah. And you had to buy the CD, and it was about $10 for about 10 minutes. It was expensive to use the internet. And back then, when I first started using the internet, this was in 93, 94, the only thing that we really did was message boards, and it was all like DOS prompts and stuff. Because like the internet as we know it today wasn't really a thing. There was a couple of little pages here and there, but then it was sort of by like about 97, 98 that the social element started to happen, like where you could actually chat. There was a thing called ICQ, which was like real-time chatting. There was a Microsoft Chat, and it was really cool because it was called Microsoft Comic Chat, and you'd go into like these rooms or groups, and you see all these usernames, and you'd start chatting, and then it would draw like comic strips of your conversation. So you're like,
Oh,
"Hi, how
wow.
are you?" And it would draw like a little character saying, "Hi, how?" It was like in bubble speech, and it was all real time. It was pretty advanced when you think about what was happening there. And so that was social. And then it wasn't until sort of there was a platform, and I don't know which was which. There was social. There was MySpace, but there's also something called Friendster or Friends something, and it was basically you create a profile. Like this is like pre-Facebook era, and it was really that thing. Like you said, you put your bio in there. Yeah, maybe you could upload one picture because no one had digital pictures back then. Like getting a digital picture was hard. You had to get a scanner and scan like a regular picture. Like there was no digital cameras at the beginning of this.
And you wouldn't put it on a website because the files would be too big and it would never load
It'll
anyway.
take too long.
Yeah, for sure. So it was a very different era in terms of where it all started. But for me, I guess my first real taste of it was the big one was Facebook, right? Like Facebook, I got a personal invite back in the day when you had to be invited into Facebook. And I got it from some friends I went to school with. I'm like, I'm not joining with you guys. You guys are losers in real life. Why do I hang out with you in this website? And that sounds horrible. But anyway, but my wife joined it. And so I sort of entered the social media space by proxy through my wife because she was like 22 or something when we first got married. And I was working full time and she was staying home. We were living in Taiwan. And so it was a way for her to connect with her friends just from Europe, went to South Africa and New Zealand. So it created an opportunity for her to find all these long lost friends. And so the first taste of social media was, wow, I can talk to people I didn't know existed anymore. But then very quickly I saw with my wife, it just chewed up her time. And ever since then, I've not been a super fan of social media. I use it for the purposes that I think it's valuable for. But outside of that, yeah, it's a big time waster in my opinion. But
it's interesting. I was going to say, like, as you say, like the consumption part of social media can really feel like a big time waster. Where it's interesting that I think a lot of people who are involved in creative stuff and are creating stuff for social media or whatever it might be, view it quite differently. And the people who are creating things don't actually engage in that constant consumption side of things that people who aren't creating do.
Yeah. So look, to me, the social media element today, where it is, 20 years later, 25 years later to when I first sort of got into that sort of space, it's a very different beast. And as you said, it's very corporate now. You like you say, you got friends on there, but you don't see a lot of their content. It's normally them sharing other content that's being created, that's being curated, and it's all very much, in my opinion. And I'm a programmer, right? So I kind of had this. I like to see under the hood sort of thing. It's very, very driven by algorithms, and so this is why I'm interested about today's topic, because we're talking about the impact social media is having on mental habits and behaviors and health. And so, so I'm curious to see where this conversation goes and what we learn from the impact it's having in that space.
Well, after the song break, which we're going to go to in just a minute, we're actually going to have an expert come on and share with us, and that is Jennifer Skews. And Jennifer, after the song break, you can correct me if I've got your last name wrong. But thank you for joining us on Conversations today, whether you're listening around Australia, around the world, whether you're tuned in on social media. Whoops. Facebook
so
or
ironic
YouTube.
how our topic today is social media and we're streaming all across social media. But this is one of the pros of social media.
But we're not anti-social media. I don't think we should be.
True.
I think it's like any other tool.
Yep, absolutely. So we would love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to text in or share your comments online. You can text in on 0488 185 00. And make sure you hang around. We do have a really great free offer that's going to be coming up later in the show today. A little book called Finding Peace in a World of Worry. I'm going to go to a song now. This is Joel Perez, David Quimber, and Mark Rasmussen, all very fantastic
Man,
names,
you nailed that.
with a song called It Is Well, Oh My Soul. Thanks for listening to Conversations here on Faith FM.
When sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Here's my heart, make it whole. For you I live, in you I dwell. Oh, my soul, it is well. My sin on the bliss of this glorious God. My sin not in part, but the whole is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. Here's my heart, make it whole. For you I live, in you I dwell. Oh, my soul, it is with my It is well with my soul. Here's my heart, make it whole. For you I live, in you I dwell. Oh, my soul, it is well.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conversations here on Faith FM. And Robbie, I'm going to throw it to you to introduce our guest for today.
Hey, I am super excited to invite Jennifer, and I hope I'm saying this right, Jennifer. Jennifer Skews, is that how we say last name?
Correct. Yes. It's
Wonderful.
spelling, so it's a bit difficult to actually pronounce for many people and spell.
And it's so good to see you, Jennifer. Now, Jennifer, for those of you who are regulars on Faith FM, you would have heard Jennifer's voice on The Breakfast Show quite regularly, actually, at the moment, isn't it? Pretty much every week. I think you do a little segment with Blake.
And I was on this morning.
Oh, you're on this morning. All right. So we got to put you on the payroll.
I think so.
So, Jennifer, just to as a way of introduction, you are a professional health psychologist.
Yes,
Is what
I am.
what I found on the internet about you, and
Okay.
and it says here that you are committed to raising community awareness about the importance of physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Is that all
Yes.
true still?
It's still true, and it's looking at health and health behaviours. I also did a course on nutritional medicine for mental health for a postgraduate diploma. So I work physically, mentally, emotionally, and working with nutrients as well, or nutritional input, particularly for people's brains, because they're often a bit starving by the time they come and see me, nutritionally deficient.
And so you practice in private. You have a private practice, I believe, up there in New South Wales, right? You're on the border, or just south of the border,
over
right?
the border in New South Wales, and I work 2 to 3 days a week. I do part-time.
Well, we're absolutely thrilled that you could make time out of your busy schedule to join us this afternoon live right across Australia, right here on Conversations on Faith FM. And as we've said just before the break, before you came on, today we're talking about social media and mental health and the impact that one has on the other, and what we can do just to have good mental health all the way around, and good social media habits and those sorts of things. And so thank you for joining the conversation. You've got Brad here on the screen. If you're watching this on social media, of course, we got Brad here, we got Alicia, and this is the first time we all got together around a virtual table, so to speak. And we just want to start unpacking some of these aspects of, what mental health impact has social media had over the past couple of years. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it just a fad? Are people just blaming social media for mental health issues and things like that? So what's your take on that, Jennifer? Have you seen any impact on mental health from a social media perspective in your practice?
I have mainly parents who are concerned might talk to me. I do have occasionally I have a young person, an adolescent, who will come and see me with depression, anxiety, issues like that, anxiety particularly, and often social media is connected to that, and trying to connect with their peers via social media. But there are multiple effects of social media and that screen time on the brain, as well as the mood, and how young people fare. And it has increased over time. I've been checking out statistics, and it's a bit scary when you look at how much screen time our young people have, even preschoolers. It goes way back, because it's often a good, what they call a babysitter for parents. It helps to focus the children and that. And I'm not saying it's all bad, but it's the excess use of, and it's not monitored, becomes very dangerous. So this is where I've sort of looked at what sort of mental health issues you have, and what happens to the brain when you have all this social media. So,
awesome. And just going on there, as a parent myself of 2 girls, what are some of the sort of long-term effects that you've noticed in children who spend too much time on the screen? I know with my daughter, we've sort of tried to limit her screen time because we've noticed some sort of behaviors that she's become a lot more reserved now, especially with COVID and how everything was online.
yes.
So just in your line of work, what are some of the long-term effects that can happen with our children?
Well, first of all, social isolation. And you're only working with 2 of the senses, sight and sound. So you're not having an all-round experience with other children. And young people are meant to be out, active, playing, doing things together, because that's where we learn social skills. So it really impacts their social skills. And like you said, your daughter became a bit more reserved. But it does affect the brain in that social media, particularly on excess levels, will impact brain development. Our brain is fully grown by mid-20s. Females' brain growth, it happens a bit sooner. That's the size of the brain. But actual development takes time through teens and 20s, where we do a maturing cycle. So when you're on social media all the time, the brain cannot grow and develop Therefore, it impacts the mental emotional health as well. Okay, I can talk a bit more about what sort of brain development we're talking about here if you want to. I'm relying on you asking questions, or what would you like to focus on? This is a number of areas there.
Yeah. Let's go down that avenue. I mean, we do know obviously that puberty is a particularly important time for brain development. After, I think it's the, that period of age between about 4 to 6 is when we tend to have the first initial massive burst in neurological development. But then it is absolutely around the puberty time when we see a lot more of, with neuroplasticity, brain development.
Yeah.
So what sort of effects are kids having on their brains, by consuming so much social media at such a critical point in their development?
Well, one aspect is beliefs and values, because it's our attitudes, beliefs and values that develop into our character. So when you're on social media, and when you have a look at social media, some young people use it well because of their values are healthy, so they don't overuse it, and it can be an advantage. But for a lot of young people, what happens, the beliefs and values are dictated by their peers online, and there's a lot of bullying, there's a lot of, I guess, what they call cyberbullying, but also they often feel rejected. And because you're online, you can't discuss it. If someone's upsetting you, what do you do with that? So the brain goes into this emotional space, because we actually have a 3-part brain. We've got a survival brain. So often their survival brain is functioning because they're hypervigilant, because they don't know what's going to come in at them, often with social media, particularly if there's a group of them chatting. And then the emotional brain is being underdeveloped because it's relying on the feel-good factor of being in social media and accepted by your peers online. If that doesn't happen, then you go into this emotional space, which puts the brain out of balance. So the actual neocortex, which houses the intelligence factor, like the self-awareness and what they're doing, can't fully develop. And the emotional brain, which is linked to the right side of that front part of the brain, is also underdeveloped. So their capacity to rationalize, to think in a healthy way, is impaired. And they're often very emotionally driven a lot of the time. So it relies on feel good, which means adrenaline, cortisol, running on those factors. And it's very addictive. They become very addictive. And it stimulates addictions physically in the brain.
So Jennifer, just going on with that. So with the way, like I just had a conversation last week with 6 high school kids on the impact social media has on their life, right, as teenagers right now. And it was really interesting because they shared with me how that one of what they perceive, and this is like 14 to 16-year-olds, what they perceive as being one of the negative effects of social media for them in that age bracket is that they find themselves constantly comparing their life and their self-image to those that they're following and consuming the content from. So from your professional perspective, that's obviously a problem. So if you want to unpack that.
Okay. So you're looking at how their own self-perception and self-awareness. And if they're relying on the feedback of others or what social media is telling them, then it becomes a major problem, and they're constantly, I guess, seeking approval. And they can't really process or resolve things, as I said. So they take it with them. They go to bed with it, they wake up with it, and they can't deal with it because they've got no one to deal with it with, because they wouldn't talk to their parents about it. I find there's so much bullying online. So you can say one thing to a person, and to a young person, if they're sensitive, they take it on board, they believe it, this is the beliefs and values, then they have a negative self-bias. And that stays with them. So it develops, and this is where depression, anxiety, and all those other mental health issues come into play. So if that makes sense. But one of the things that came up was, well, loneliness was one of them, but envy. because of this comparison online all the time, and they want what others don't have. And I think young people online are going to give a distorted perspective of themselves. This is one of the problems.
So just as a follow-up to that, so we obviously know that there's potential dangers with social media, the impact on mental health, those sorts of things. I think one of the things I'd like to get out of this conversation, because we're talking to an expert like yourself, is what are some of the tools or the techniques that can be used as parents or as young people listening to this online or on air? What can we do in this space, specifically regarding the comparison and the affecting our self-esteem and all that sort of stuff? What's some takeaways we can practically do or implement to help with that sort of
I think parents, like you were saying, Alicia, being aware of your children and what changes you're seeing. Like you noticed that she was more maybe withdrawn, which often happens because they're reliant totally on social media. They don't have the social skills. So if you take them out or do things, they don't seem to fit in necessarily. Not all, but this is, you get a certain amount of children on social media that's their whole life, right? So that becomes a problem. So the parent being aware of that is so important. And this is where I've had parents call me and want to talk to me about it and about their children's well-being, and social media fits into that very often. So seeking help, like if the parent develops a good communication with their children, because then they will be open with them. And so this means in parenting from day one, you need to really work at communication, being available, non-judgmental, but directing children. And I think a parent monitoring what is their children doing on social media, what are they watching, what are they listening to, even ask some questions like when they've been online, say, oh, who did you speak to today, and have a chat and show interest. I think it's important, and just letting them know because they're aware that things can happen online. If anyone is being mean to you or bullying you or whatever, because it's going from young age groups through to teen years, then you can talk to me about it. We'll work it out. So it's that, I think openness as a parent that works. And I find parents who show that love and openness as their children are growing up don't have so many problems with this sort of thing. And if it is a problem, they pick up on it quickly. And because they can communicate with their child and they show love, that child can then talk to them and respond.
Awesome. I love that, how the responsibility comes back to the parent, and even how you were talking before about using the device as sort of like a babysitter type thing.
Yes.
Even good shows that we may think are good, like, for example, there's Coco Melon and all these other children's shows that may seem educational, it sort of still creates that distance from a child to a child, sort of like that face-to-face interaction. What I was wanting to know is it too late to sort of reverse the effects on your children? Like, does it get to a certain age where it's just too late or they're too far into it? How would you sort of go about that?
Well, as Brad said, neuroplasticity is a key factor. Because the brain is constantly growing and developing, and there are parts of the brain, there's an emotional little area of the brain in the emotional brain that grows brain cells. There's only two areas that have that neuroplasticity, and the other one is to do with your intelligence and your thinking and what you're doing on that capacity. So we grow those brain cells, and when you're online all the time, you're not doing that. The brain's very specific in what it's programming, and it's not to actually grow brain cells. They have to be active and outside and enjoying other social interactions. There are lots of things you can do. Exercise is powerful in growing brain cells, so they've got a better intelligence and more to use. So I think that's an important factor. And that means we're talking about also what parents can do is getting their children out, socially active, making sure they have a lot of social interaction other than just sitting online the whole time. So that means the parent has to, and I believe we're all responsible for young people because they're growing and developing and they don't understand everything, and they will make mistakes as we did when we were growing up. So I think that's very important. But the brain can be rewired, and this is where if a child is really that deeply into it and it's becoming it's an addiction, getting professional help, the parent getting professional help to help that child to process it, to step back, to understand what it's doing to them and what they can do then to really rewire that brain, which doesn't take a lot. Once you start refocusing and they start looking on other skills and other things, so much less time on social media particularly. I mean, we use computers and screens for children for work or for school. So it's not about that. It's more about that social context because they're not developing emotionally. So this means the parent has to help them grow emotionally, which is factored into the brain, the emotional brain.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I wonder, Jennifer, could you share maybe, for example, like a cognitive behavioral therapy approach for helping young kids? Because I think this can be the challenge. Like with older kids, they can kind of understand how to reframe their thinking a little bit to be aware that, okay, just because somebody somewhere said something doesn't make it true, and it doesn't mean that, they have said something, so the difference, for example, between so-and-so said this about me and they made me angry, as opposed to somebody said something and I reacted by becoming angry. So how do we teach younger kids in particular the difference between, how would you put it, kind of responding and reacting?
In an appropriate way or an inappropriate way. So how do you make that shift? Because there are some young people who have worked that out, but a lot don't, because that's part of the growing up process, and they're dependent on what they see, what they read, and of course parental and friends' input. So for a parent to be able to find out what the child is thinking and feeling, if they're looking a bit down, say, oh, you look really sad today, what's happened? There's something, you're sad about something, like a young child, even through to teen years, being aware. And they might go, no, I'm all right. And they go off, but they're not. Sometimes you have to pursue it and just give them some input. And one of the things they found scientifically, that if you teach people, and this includes children, how the brain works, it works a lot smarter. So really that education about brain function and what goes where and how we program the brain. And often they're very interested in neuroplasticity and how the changing brain. So there's lots of good information online for that sort of thing. But for the parent to be able to check out the child's thoughts. And often you say, what do you think? Oh, I don't know. Well, I say, and if they look really sad, say, well, you must be thinking something sad, because you can't feel sad if you don't think sad. Or you seem to be angry. What are you angry about? Well, I don't know. Well, do a bit of digging. So, was there something happened when you were speaking to your friends online, or was something going on at school? Because it's all connected. They go online with all these kids, and then they go to school, and they're going to get bullied there. If they're being bullied online, it's going to continue at school. So it's helping. The parent needs to find out, and even maybe talk to a teacher and get feedback. But it's checking it out with their child as to what's really going on. And this is where, if you have a good connection with your child and you have to develop that and show interest in that you really care and letting them know that, then that will help. And of course, from a Christian perspective, praying for your children, praying for their protection, and praying that they will listen to you or help you, inviting the Holy Spirit to lead and guide. So there's lots of things you can do. I think that's an important one, the power of prayer, but also not to ignore it. And this is where they'll get over it attitude a parent has. Well, they won't necessarily. Yeah.
So Jennifer, these have been really practical, very practical tools that parents can take, and even young people can take. For everyone listening right now, if you just joined us, we're on Conversations here on Faith FM right across Australia. We've got a special guest, Jennifer Skews, who is an expert when it comes to basically all things the brain, is what I'm going to call you. I'm going to call you the brain lady, because you get invited to talk about the brain and the impacts of the brain on all the different shows across the network. So we appreciate your willingness to be here, Jennifer. Hey, I've got a question for you regarding, I'm just going to call it addiction to not necessarily just social media, but also just like screen time and all that sort of stuff. I've got a 7-year-old son, and we made a decision as parents when we had our son, because that was kind of, social media was a big thing back in 2015 when my kid was born.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
we were like, and tablets and iPhones and iPads and all that sort of stuff. So we made a decision not to introduce technology until he was of the age of 2, like until he's above 2. We didn't want him to play with iPads and that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that to make anybody feel bad. That's just a decision my wife and I made. Now, we found, and you know, we had all our haters out there going, "Oh, you're really hampering your child's development. He's going to be left behind," all this sort of stuff. Look, I can tell you right now that my son's 7. He uses an iPad for his schoolwork and stuff. He picked it up just fast enough. It's all right. Don't stress. They pick it up very, very quickly. And he's actually teaching me things that I didn't even recognize. But anyway, here's my point. My point is about addiction, right? So what we did notice though, my son was probably about 6 or 5.5, 6 when he started using the iPad for reading exercises for school, because they have this program called Reading Eggs, and you go in there and it's basically gamification of learning, right? So English, reading and writing and maths and all that sort of stuff. It's a pretty impressive tool, because he was learning stuff like self-learning basically through this gamification model. However, what we started to notice was, as soon as we said, okay, you've done your 20 minutes of class time on the iPad, as soon as we took it off him, man, we saw behavior coming out of our son that we'd never seen before, like tantrums and screaming and crying and I want to do more. Give me more. I want to do schoolwork. Now, we know he's saying schoolwork. It sounds good as a parent, but he's really talking about the gamification element of it, right? So my question to you is there any tips or techniques you would suggest in terms of, as a parent, helping our kids who, look, we live in a world of technology. We're not the Amish. No offense to the Amish out there. We're not trying to shun technology. We're not trying to say it's all evil and stay away from it. We live in that world. Our kids need to learn how to use technology at some point. How can we help them like learn the rational behaviors of like, okay, I've spent 20 minutes on this. That's enough. Go get some exercise outside and don't throw a tantrum, sort of thing. It's probably a big question. It's like I'm asking the silver bullet for you, but yeah, any tips? Love to hear it.
It covers a lot of area there, because you went, just looking at the time frame you've used, up until 2 years of age, the child's brain from birth through to 2 is not intellectually oriented. It is wired emotionally, and it's got a survival brain. There are 3 aspects to the brain, but the thinking brain doesn't come online till about the age of 2, which is when you introduced social media type, well, you know, like screen time or whatever you did it with. But I think even at that age, children understand. So instructing them initially, even now, there are limits on how much time you can be on it, because it's not good for you. As they get older, if they're interested in the reality of research and statistics and what it can do, which most of them aren't, but for older children, maybe that's something you can do. I don't know. It depends on your child. But so that means from 2 on, they start to develop their thinking. And if it's around what they're watching on screen, it becomes well entrenched fairly quickly. And they become what I call attached to it, right? An addiction is an attachment, and when you break the attachment, that's when you see these behaviors. So addiction is when you desire something, and when you can't have it, you do the biggest meltdown. And that is often physiological, but also definitely emotional. And it's about control. You took away the power this child had, your son had, to use the computer, and he wasn't ready to do that. I don't know if he was in the middle of something. Did you check where he was up to when you said, no, we're going to finish there or take it away? Was he in the middle of reading something? I don't know. Only you would know that. So
stage, and then when that's finished, you reach a level and there's another level. So we normally at an end of a level, but I guess because the level just finished, he wanted to start the next level. You know what I mean?
Okay. But this is where maybe when you give it to him, you say, look, you work out what levels he can do and say, look, you can do this much, right? And then I'll be coming into, we've got to close it off. So you give them fair warning and let them know you don't want any tantrums, that you can do it again later on, or tomorrow you'll be able to use it again. Yeah, you set the guidelines, because children, if not, they create their own guidelines.
I want to call you the super nanny now.
Yeah, I was just going to say this whole nother segment on parenting stuff.
Sorry,
and I
Brad.
would love to sit down with you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because it sounds to me like, in a sense, the challenge with gamified things, and I found this in my own life as well, is it creates those certain incentives, and they're designed to really get us into a state of flow that we feel as though the challenge and the interaction is really great, and so we get very absorbed in it very fast. And as opposed to like a chemical addiction, say to nicotine or something like that, it can be incredibly frustrating if you're doing something and you're in that state of flow and you're really enjoying it, and then suddenly it just stops when you weren't prepared.
One of the things they find in research, children don't have emotional self-regulation on these media platforms necessarily, because that's something we have to learn. So that self-control, and that's where the parent is a model, particularly from a very early age. So that's very important. So there are quite a few issues that you've come up with. See, one of the things you must realise, that when you are looking at screen time, research initially, this was years ago, found that when you first, if you've not watched a TV, for example, you get a TV, it takes about 45 minutes for the brain to get in that zone. Next time you watch it, it takes 45 seconds. So the moment you turn something on, and how often do you find people are so absorbed, and you try and interrupt them at home, they tell you to get lost, and I'm watching, and because of this zoning, these screens actually zone the brain, which is not good. That means they're not able to be themselves because of that, the zone that they're in. So this is why giving warning, telling them, letting them know, I think is important when it comes to children. I mean, as adults, we need to learn to self-regulate. How many adults are addicted to social media and have a tantrum if you take it away from them?
That is an excellent segue, Jennifer. We're going to go to a song break just in a little bit here, but when we come back in the last half hour we've got with you, what I would love to unpack with you is exactly what we just started touching on. This is going to go more into like the adult now connection with social media, and the specific area I'm interested in exploring in the conversation this afternoon is there seems to be a rise of ADHD. Not just in the West, or in US, but here in Australia. More of the adult friends that I have just come out as being diagnosed with ADHD, and I want to explore this connection, if there is one even, between ADHD and social media. So that's something I want to pick up when we get back after the break. But yeah, I don't know. Have you guys experienced this? Like every second person I know now is telling me that they're diagnosed with ADHD. They're all taking medication now. If you're on social media at all, you see there's on TikTok, like every second video showing up is someone going, look, I've got ADHD and this is what my life's like, accept me how I am, and all this sort of stuff. Have you guys been seeing this?
There's certainly a lot of instances I've seen of people who, treat it as, similar to other mental health conditions, as the idea that it's a part of their character, as opposed to it's something that can actually be debilitating and needs assistance to help within their life. We'll continue on this conversation just in a little bit because we need to go to a song now. But you're listening to Conversations here on Faith FM. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions for Jennifer while we're here, feel free to text them in on 0488 185 00 and we can pass those along. This next song coming up is from a group called Elenyi, which is 3 sisters from the United States. And this song is called Fear is a Liar. You're listening to Conversations on Faith FM.
When he told you you're not good enough, when he told you you're not right, when he told you you're not strong enough to put up a good fight, When he told you you're not worthy, when he told you you're not loved, when he told you you're not beautiful, you'll never be enough. Fear, he is a liar. He will take your breath, stop you in your steps. Fear, he is a liar. He will rob your rest, steal your happiness, cast your fear in the fire. 'Cause fear, he is a liar. When he told you you were troubled, you'll forever be alone. When he told you you should run away, you'll never find a home. When he told you you were dirty and you should be ashamed. When he told you you could be the one that grace could never change. He is a liar. He'll take your breath, stop you in your steps. Fear, he is a liar. He'll rob your rest, steal your happiness, cast your fear in the fire. 'Cause fear, he is a liar. Let your fire fall and cast out all my fears. Let your fire fall, your love is all I feel. Let your fire fall and cast out all my fears. Let your fire fall, your love is all I feel. Let your fire fall and cast out all my fears. Let your fire fall, your love is all I feel. Oh, fear, he is a liar. He will take your breath, stop you in your steps. Fear, he is a liar. He will rob your rest, steal your happiness, cast your fear in the fire. 'Cause fear, he is a liar. 'Cause fear, he is a liar.
You're listening to Conversations on Faith FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conversations on Faith FM with Robbie, Alicia, Brad, and today we have a special guest with us, Jennifer Skews, who's been sharing with us some really interesting stuff about social media, self-esteem, ways to help with kids, teenagers, and even adults. And before the break, we were just broaching the topic of dealing with addictions. And now addictions to social media are absolutely a very real thing that affects not just young children, but adults and people of all ages as well. Robbie, what was the question you had for Jennifer? I can't quite remember now.
Oh, so I was just going to say, in this last few minutes we got with you, well, last half hour or so, we want to unpack the correlation or the connection between ADHD and social media use. There seems to be a growing trend on TikTok, Instagram, on Reels, and these things. People posting that every other person's got a diagnosed ADHD as an adult if they are distracted, if they have poor time management, or if they are hyper focused on something and forget everything else. All of a sudden now everyone's got ADHD. So I just wanted you to talk to that sort of point on, have you seen this or heard of this or noticed that there's this correlation happening?
There is a lot of ADHD being diagnosed, particularly in children. And yet it's a very mixed bag, because how much is it ADHD? How much is it bad behavior? How much is it that the child has one of those sort of thrill-seeking type personalities, or they're wired, hyperly wired as part of their personality at birth? But they do find when it is actually a brain dysfunction, there is to do with the synapses in the brain and messages that go across. And what happens is that they can't screen out stimuli. So it is to do with brain function, and therefore they easily get distractive. And there are different types of ADHD or ADHD hyperactivity. There's ADD, which is without the hyperactivity. But there are a number of different variations of, but I believe it needs to be screened by an expert, not just your general practitioner, or a quick assessment online, because there are lots of factors involved. It's something that I believe is treatable, certainly, and because I work with nutrients, so I find there's some very good nutrients you can use to help ADHD brains if that's what they really have. But there are things you can do. Is it bad behaviour? And I had a nephew who struggled with ADHD growing up, and that was to do with food additives and allergies and things that seemed to stimulate it. And yet he had a very good brain, high intellect, but really couldn't apply it easily until a bit later in life. And he went from hyperactivity to underactivity, where he then struggled because it affects their sleep cycle. There's a lot of things. It can really upset the whole nervous system. So they really struggle with a lot of things. But I noticed as he was growing up and I interacted with him, he knew the difference between when that hit, and it was definitely stimulated when he went to school or with other people, but at times he would use it just to get out of doing things. And I'd catch him out and say, well, I know that you're actually not being hyperactive. You're doing it deliberately. And he'd look at me, oh, yes, so he did know. He was aware. I believe that they say often that children grow out of it in their teens, like the brain corrects itself. I've heard that. So it's a hard one, because like I said, I think it's overdiagnosed, and other things need to be checked out with that. And how much is, because we're looking at the impact of screens zoning the brain, affecting the brain, how much is that causing that type of reaction? Take the screen away, the child's brain can correct itself. So, or the social media.
I've seen these videos getting around at the moment, like I don't know if it's because they show up once and you watch it and then they start feeding you nothing but the ADHD videos, but that's what I seem to be getting at the moment. And what I keep seeing is that if this is what they say, at least in the States, I don't know about here in Australia, but they say if you've got 5 out of the 9 criteria, then you have ADHD, but you got to go get it tested officially, right?
Yes.
And like you look at the list, you're easily distracted, you're impulsive, you have poor time management, you have difficulty regulating your emotions, and you find it very hard to focus in general, but then you get fixated on 1 or 2 things. Now, if you're using social media like 4 or 5 hours a day, you tick every one of those boxes. You have poor time management, you got emotions are all messed up, you're hyper focused, you're impulsive, and you're distracted. So by default, then, because of those behavior sets, you have ADHD, right? So I'm finding it kind of a bit hard to accept that most people I know now who are in 30s and 40s all of a sudden have undiagnosed ADHD.
Yes, I have adults that have come to me. They say, I've just been diagnosed with ADHD.
So
you can't just read the DSM-5 and go, oh yeah, that sounds about right.
Exactly.
A proper diagnosis.
Yeah, and just going off that, a sort of study that a recent research that I was looking at is that they found in America and here in Australia and Germany as well that a lot of people are self-diagnosing or they're adopting mental illnesses or disorders that they don't have because of what they see as being like glorified on social media. A recent one was Tourette's. So there are like a whole bunch of young girls now that all of a sudden they have Tourette's, and they've linked it to an influencer who has Tourette's, and he has millions and millions of followers. And so they're like, sort of goes back to that validation that you were talking about before, how young people want to be accepted, they want to be noticed, and they see someone who's acting a certain way or has a certain mental illness, and they've decided to adopt that illness for themselves. So I think it's important, like how you were saying, to get professionally checked, and just don't self-diagnose yourself off TikTok and social media, guys.
Social contagion.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a hard one because some children, well, a lot of them are highly intelligent and they know how to do that. We also have what's called mirror neurons, which actually mirror other people, and you do it. It actually happens unconsciously, and you might find, like when you're sitting with someone, that you find you're both sitting in the same position or opposite poles. So we actually reflect. So young people would actually mirror some of that behaviour, and it's attention seeking, as you said. You know, kids want attention, particularly if they're not getting it at home. And I'm not accusing parents here, because parents sometimes think they're giving them enough attention, but maybe it's not in the right way. So again, getting some help too, and finding out from the child, developing that relationship, you know, like, well, how are we doing as parents? Is there more that we can do for you that's not happening? You know, check things out, because it's that relationship that does a lot of repair work in the brain. But with the ADHD, if your child's diagnosed with it and they do have a lot of screen time, I suggest that you suspend screen time, that they have take a whole week, 2 weeks off, and see what happens to their behaviour. Okay. Another factor is to do with, in the nutritional level, is colours, sugars, additives create that same response that you read out of that list. And I can remember years ago having a parent come to me with I think he was about 8 or whatever at home, and he couldn't keep his room tidy and he wasn't getting his homework done and he was just messing up. And she thought it was something like the ADHD. And I went through, initially I go through, well, what are you giving him? What's he eating? When he comes home from school, what does he have? Oh, he has a cordial and a biscuit, you know, a sweet biscuit. I said, I want you now to change that and give him, you know, some fruit and, you know, a dry biscuit with something savoury on it. And she did. And she rang a week later and said, he's fine. His room's good. Everything's going well, because it was caused by the input, you know, that poor nutrition. And so remove sugar. That's another thing parents can do. They'll see a big difference if they remove sugar from a child's diet. That's a major player.
There's definitely studies out there I've seen that show a strong correlation between, you know, high insulin levels in the body and ADHD, because as far as I know, it's the same part of the brain that craves dopamine from sugar as well, that deals with insulin resistance. Yes.
So there are a lot of foods we have, like the pleasure foods, that actually interfere with brain function, whether it be dopamine, serotonin. So, and that's, if it's that happens with adults, it's going to happen more so, I believe, with children. So there's lots of things to check out. And if they're on social media a lot, they're more likely to snack or get sweet things or pick-me-ups. I don't know how aware parents are of that. So, so that's
so let's assume that someone has someone I might know, maybe not, but someone I know might say, hey, I've got all of these characteristics, right? So I'm easily distracted, I'm impulsive, time management's poor, and all that sort of stuff. Let's assume we don't know whether it's legit ADHD or not. What sort of, from a brain perspective, what are some of the mechanisms an adult can do? Like, we've been talking primarily about the children and parents and that sort of stuff. What could an adult do to self-help in just sort of seeing whether this is legit ADHD or whether it's actually just connection to the lifestyle, as you say, diet? What sort of things would you suggest to try?
Well, what I would do is, and you can do it by going online, is educating yourself about brain balance, because the computer in our brain that really is aware, functions, does everything, is the neocortex, that frontal area of the brain, and it's divided left and right. Right, in between that is the conscience, and the will also is sort of in the middle of that. It connects between left and right brain. So if the right brain is your thinking, intelligent brain that processes, makes decisions, is aware of what's going on around you, has that self-awareness, the right side of the brain goes into emotional connection. And if we've loaded a lot of traumatic emotions, and that we actually run on emotions, this will mimic the ADHD factor, because we're always emotionally driven. And this is what children do. They like being hyped. They like being excited. You know, and that means if they're on social media, it becomes a drama because of what someone's doing or not doing. That's what they thrive on. And it gets the adrenaline, the cortisol, but it's also running with the brain out of balance. So with an adult and children, I work on brain balance. So what can you do? And there are a lot of things you can do, either nutritionally or exercise or learning specific, a simple correcting the heart rate, corrects the brain balance. So lots of things I teach people to be able to work on that. Yeah, things like magnesium is a key player because we don't make it. So if you can, the children we all need it. We don't make it, and it relaxes the muscles and nerves. It helps pick up the dopamine in the brain. So, and they find that often people with mental health have these nutritional deficiencies. So when a client comes to me, whether it be young or older, I do the magnesium and get them on that. It makes a huge difference because we lose, with stress, you lose lots of magnesium daily and you're not replacing it. About 80% of the population, which includes all ages, is magnesium deficient. So it's a huge, huge factor. That's a key player. The other one is actually an amino acid called, I think it's pronounced L-theanine or theanine, and it's an extract of predominantly green tea. It is in other plants, but it actually helps to relax the brain and make it more alert and balance left and right brain. So sometimes for me, that's what I'll use versus, because I don't do the medical side, but I can do the nutritional side. And that makes a huge difference to young and old, where the brain can settle. And they have found in studies it does help the ADHD brain. It can help to some degree. So there's lots of things you can do to help correct that.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, I'm just going to quickly, while we're here, we do have a good free offer for listeners today. If you are interested in finding peace in a world of worry, and I think that's something that we can all agree on, that we would love to have peace in a world filled with worry. If you'd like to get your free copy of today's giveaway, the code word is C53, so the letter C followed by 2 numbers, 53, and you can text that code word to 048888 18500, and our Faith FM giveaway bot will reply asking for some of your details, and then we'll get that sent to you. So one more time, that is called Finding Peace in a World of Worry. The code word is C53, and the number is 048888 18500. Jennifer, one question I did have for you is, when it comes to the mental side of things for people dealing with addictions, often people just feel helpless, right? That I'm stuck in this cycle. There's nothing I can do to get out of it, so I might as well not even try. How can people deal with that kind of mindset, that helpless mindset?
Well, one of the things is there's a lot of shame attached to addictions. So people are often they're in denial. I don't have a problem when they do. And it's not until it's taken away. And I've worked with addictions, and I find that's a real struggle. I'm fine, I can have a bit, I can control it. Well, they can't. So it comes back to how controllable is it. But it's with an addiction that once a person is out of denial, then you can deal with it, but often they don't. And there is a learned helplessness attached to it because they've tried. Often people have tried to give up their addiction and they just have failed. Therefore, their self-esteem's low, they're a failure. They should be able to do it, you know. And interestingly, and this is more for adults, the most powerful program that really helps break the addiction cycle is the 12-step program, which is really a Christian spiritually focused program, but in a very practical way. So this is where we can't do it on our own, but being able to tell someone, and that's the hard part. And often you don't suspect it because it's hidden. they hide it well, although often people know and nothing is said.
All right, I've got a couple of questions that have come, or texts that have come in. Let me just read these real quick. The first one here is from a lady called Ellie, and she's saying, "Hey team, looking forward to hearing my daughter Lulu talking about social media and her experiences today." Well, Ellie, thanks so much for your text. I know I'm on the same show, but Lulu was on my other show this week, The Faith Experiment, and she was on the panel. We talked about social media and the impact it has on high school age kids. If you've missed that episode, you can get it on our Faith FM website. Look for not conversations, that's this show. Look for The Faith Experiment, and it's called Social Media: The Good, the Bad, and Ugly. So thanks for your text, Ellie. Another one here from David. David is saying, "Hey Robbie, because you do so many programs, it's really hard to get a message to you." Well, you've messaged this one through and I got it. So just keep trying, David. So I appreciate your text and listening. And here's another one. This one's more appropriate for you to listen to, Jennifer. It's dealing with our topic today. This is from Paula. Paula writes, "Addiction comes in many forms. The transgressor has many weapons. Technology is his best yet, all designed to distract us from God and parents. The devil is in the air / Wi-Fi. Undeveloped brains. If your child was playing with fire, you'd save them. Why not from the net, the web? No matter how they kick and scream, I guess I'm supposed to say, it destroys the frontal lobe. Also, nutrition has much to do with why so many have ADHD. Alzheimer's is a classic example."
Yes.
So there's a couple of comments there. What's your remarks to that one?
Okay, well, yeah, it is, because addictions are something that are hard to break but never impossible. They do find that unless you have destroyed parts of the brain, like alcohol is a prime example, that the brain can recover because of its neuroplasticity. And certainly knowing that if it's a child or young person, to take that addiction away means they're going to go through what we call that withdrawal. And I believe it is a spiritual battle. I think this the person who sent the text in is correct. So for parents, praying parents, that in studying how to pray for that sort of problem and protect the child, because God will protect anyone, the power of prayer, which I mentioned before. So yes, you can tackle it from that level, but I think it's multifaceted, and that's what that comment or questions were about, because you've got to replace the nutritional side if that's a problem as well. So we've got the physical, mental, emotional and spiritual aspects of it.
And it is very much, as you say, it's an issue of replacement. You can't just take away an addiction and assume that that void will stay there. You need to replace a negative relationship with a thing or person with a positive one.
Yeah. And that means giving, if you're going to take something away from a child, then you have to give it something in its place, which means a better activity, an activity that is more stimulating, finding out what would you like to do now. We can go and do other things. Would you like to go to a different place, or, what is it you want to do that we can do together? So it's particularly, I find young people really want to bond with their parents, and they often feel so isolated and alone, and that mum and dad don't understand. So this is where parents have to really work at that. And that's a very powerful tool for that child.
Definitely. And just on what you were touching on before, the spiritual warfare, I just want to share a text just real quick. 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 16, "But avoid irrelevant babble, for it will lead people into more and more ungodliness." And sometimes when we think of addiction, we don't think of social media at all. It's more of the narcotics with
Chemical addictions.
Yeah. So I feel like I am partly addicted to social media, if I'm being 100% honest. But I've noticed that with myself, and then I've sort of made it sort of intentional for me to not go straight to my phone in the mornings and see what's happening on social media, which is something that I'm still working on, but I think it's important to be aware.
Every time you rewire the brain, but you're also working on changing that habit. And a child is attracted to the wrong thing. It's the nature, that's what we call that fallen nature, whatever you want to call it, carnal nature, that will go the wrong way versus the right way. Therefore, parents have to really help their children get back on track. And if mum and dad are doing what they're telling this child not to do, then they're going to do.
Exactly. And sorry, I love a quote that you said just a while ago, and it was, addiction is hard to break but never impossible. So I think that's an encouraging thing for me, just to know that my addiction is hard for me to break, but I know it's not impossible.
It's not impossible. And when you do, I find that with sugar, when I finally gave up sugar, I went through massive withdrawal. Apparently the withdrawal can be worse than off of some of the drugs that you take. And I just found now if I have sugar, it's repulsive. There's a point where once you give up that addiction, you actually see how bad it is and how awful it is, and you don't want it anymore. For most people, depends on, again, on how much damage it's done to the brain.
Yep.
Hey, we've been
That's such a
enjoying this
powerful thing.
Sorry,
There you go,
we've
Robbie.
been enjoying this conversation, and we've got people texting in, but they're texting in the wrong number, Brad. It looks like they didn't quite get what we said. So
For the free offer?
Yeah, for the free offer. So the code word is C. What did we say it was supposed to be? Let me show it up here on the
C53.
screen. It's C53.
5-3.
People are texting in 55-5. So you want to text in C53. Nothing else, just the letter C, number 5, and number 3. And you'll get today's free offer.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Jennifer, it's been such a pleasure to pick your brain, so to speak, and just, learn about how we can deal with social media, especially as Christians, because we think it's really important for us to treasure our bodies and our minds, because we know that God has given them to us, and he's given them to us for a purpose, which is to love and to care for others. And so, we just really appreciate your time. Is there anything you would like to leave our listeners with, or directions to a website or that you have?
There are more dire consequences of social media, which we didn't go into, and we certainly don't have time. But going online, maybe looking up some articles and things on taking social media and correct time is very valuable for parents. Explore it
Fantastic.
further.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for joining us here on Conversations today. We've really enjoyed spending the time with you. Once again, if you have any other comments or questions that you want to send to us, or there is a topic you would like us to have a conversation about in an upcoming show, make sure you text that into us on 0488 185 00. And one more time, if you would like to get today's free offer for this show, Peace in a World of Worry, you can text today's code word C53 to the number 0488 185 00. Okay, Robbie, Alicia, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming and spending the time with us, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, guys, listen. Coming up next on Faith FM is Looking Up, live shows straight out of North New South Wales. So check that show out coming up right now.